You've probably been talked about before, not to your face, but behind your back. And you could feel it, the shift in tone, the way people started treating you differently, like they knew something you didn't. That's not your imagination. That's toxic gossip. And it spreads faster than the truth ever could. I remember the first time I truly understood that sentence, not as a concept, but as something that crawled under my skin and stayed there. My name is Elias. I'm not special, not famous, not powerful. I was just the quiet guy who showed up on time, did his work well, and went home without needing applause. And for a long time I thought that was invisible, safe, neutral. I was wrong. It started subtly. Conversations that stopped when I walked into the room, smiles that arrived a second too late, invitations that quietly disappeared. No one confronted me, no one accused me. But something had shifted, like the air had thickened and everyone else could breathe just fine except me. I replayed my last conversations again and again, searching for a moment where I might have said something wrong, offended someone, crossed an invisible line. Nothing made sense. One afternoon, a coworker I barely spoke to pulled me aside. His voice was low, almost apologetic. He said, "I don't know if this is true, but I thought you should know." That sentence alone was enough to make my stomach drop. He told me there were things being said about me, that I thought I was better than everyone, that I was manipulative, cold, strategic, words that didn't match the person I knew myself to be, but were suddenly attached to my name like a shadow I couldn't outrun. What hurt wasn't just the gossip, it was the realization that people believed it without ever asking me a single question. My silence had been rewritten as arrogance, my calm as calculation, my boundaries as hostility. I wanted to defend myself, to explain, to clear my name in every room I'd never even been invited into, but I didn't know how. And worse, I didn't know who was safe anymore. For weeks, I barely slept. Every interaction felt like a performance, every laugh forced, every word carefully measured. I started shrinking, hoping invisibility might protect me this time. But gossip doesn't fade when you disappear. It grows. Silence becomes confirmation. Distance becomes proof. And the lonelier I felt, the more powerful the story about me became. What finally broke me wasn't cruelty, it was kindness. A woman I trusted looked at me one day and said, "Why don't you just explain yourself?" And I realized something terrifying. I didn't owe an explanation to people who never bothered to seek the truth. I owed myself peace. That was the moment everything shifted. I stopped chasing clarity from people invested in confusion. I stopped reacting. I focused on my work, my character, my consistency. Slowly, some people noticed the disconnect between the rumor and the reality. Others didn't, and that hurt too. But I learned something that stayed with me. Gossip doesn't need your participation to survive. It only needs your attention. So I'll ask you this before we go any further. If someone has already decided who you are without ever knowing you, is it really your job to convince them otherwise? They don't gossip because they're curious, they gossip because they're insecure, because deep down your calm threatens their chaos, your silence makes them feel irrelevant. So they weaponize words, twisting the narrative, reshaping how others see you before you even realize what's happening. This isn't random behavior, it's patterned, predictable, almost mechanical once you learn how to see it. Here's a cold fact that puts everything into perspective. Research from the University of California, Riverside, found that people spend roughly 52 minutes a day talking about someone who isn't present. Nearly an hour of every day spent shaping realities that don't belong to them. And when that talk turns negative, manipulative, or emotionally charged, the psychological damage isn't abstract. Studies consistently show drops in self-esteem, increased anxiety, fractured trust, and long-term shifts in social dynamics. One conversation can quietly rewrite an entire relationship. You might only be one of those minutes, but when it's your name being passed around, even 60 seconds can be enough to change everything. Because gossip doesn't hit all at once. It spreads slowly like ink in water, subtle enough that by the time you notice it, the damage is already done. So today we're pulling back the curtain, not to shame, not to dramatize, but to understand, because once you understand how toxic gossip actually works, you stop internalizing it. You stop negotiating with it. You stop trying to prove yourself to people who were never interested in the truth to begin with. And that's where your power comes back. Inside the mind of a toxic gossiper, nothing is accidental. A major study by Biersma and Van Cleef in 2012 revealed that gossip isn't casual conversation. It's strategy wearing the costume of small talk. A way to exchange information, reinforce alliances, and quietly climb invisible social ladders. In other words, it's social currency. And like all currency, it's most desired by those who feel they don't have enough. Here's the paradox most people miss. The hunger for status doesn't come from confidence. It comes from fragility. People who feel secure rarely need to diminish others. But when someone's sense of worth is unstable, when they feel unseen or unimportant, gossip becomes a shortcut to power, a way to feel relevant without earning respect. When someone leans in and whispers, "Did you hear about him?" what they're really saying is, pay attention to me. It's not about the target, it's about the speaker. Their need to be central, their fear of fading into the background. Psychologists refer to this as an ego boost through social comparison. By lowering someone else's perceived value, they temporarily raise their own. But underneath that performance is fear. Fear of being invisible, fear of being ordinary, fear that without someone else's story to feed on, they'd have nothing to offer. And if admiration isn't available, fear will do just fine. This is why gossip often feels crueler than direct confrontation, because it's not meant to resolve anything. It's meant to control perception, to dominate narratives without ever stepping into accountability. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Toxic gossipers don't choose targets randomly. They tend to aim at two specific types of people, and while the reasons look different on the surface, the motive underneath is exactly the same. The first target is the stable one, the calm presence, the person who moves through chaos without absorbing it. You might not even realize you're intimidating them. Your boundaries feel like rejection to someone who lives on external validation. Your silence feels like judgment. Your self-control feels like superiority. And their mind fills in the gaps with resentment. Evolutionary psychology suggests gossip has long been used to weaken rivals without direct conflict. It's safer to undermine someone's reputation than to challenge their competence. And when a toxic individual senses that you're respected, grounded, or quietly progressing, they may see you as a threat that needs to be neutralized. The second target is the vulnerable one. The person who's soft-spoken, new, emotionally open, less protected. In this case, gossip becomes a tool of control, a way to establish dominance without resistance. Psychologists classify this as repeated relational aggression rooted in power imbalance. The satisfaction comes from feeling above someone else, even if only temporarily. Here's the truth most people never hear. Whether they target you because you shine or because you're struggling, the goal is identical: to regulate their own insecurity, to rebalance an internal scoreboard that never stops keeping track. So, if you've ever been the subject of toxic gossip, understand this clearly. It was never proof that you were weak, or broken, or deserving. It was proof that you mattered enough to be noticed. If this perspective is already shifting the way you see past situations, take a second and let that sink in. And if this resonates with you, gently tap the like button. Someone else needs to hear this too. Now let's talk about how gossip doesn't just spread, it transforms. One of the most dangerous mechanisms is what psychologists call the bandwagon effect. Once a narrative begins, others often join not because they believe it, but because agreement feels safer than standing alone. Belonging outweighs truth. People adopt beliefs not based on evidence, but on consensus. And consensus in the wrong environment becomes a weapon. This is how reputations are quietly dismantled in workplaces, families, and social circles without a single confrontation ever taking place. Another common tactic is empathy as camouflage, gossip disguised as concern. I'm just worried about her. I hope he's okay. This isn't compassion, it's covert aggression, a manipulation strategy where doubt is planted under the appearance of care. The listener lowers their guard and the poison slips in unnoticed. Then there's the moral mask, gossip framed as warning, as protection, as righteousness. Psychologists call this moral licensing, when people convince themselves that harmful behavior is acceptable because it serves a perceived good. People deserve to know. But what they're really protecting is their own sense of superiority. And finally, comparison. Leon Festinger's social comparison theory explains how humans constantly evaluate themselves against others. A toxic gossiper sees your growth and feels diminished by it. Instead of improving themselves, they try to reduce you. Compliments become sarcastic. Success becomes suspicious. Confidence becomes arrogance. Words are cheaper than self-work. And for some people, infinitely more satisfying. They don't just attack your reputation, they try to rewrite your inner world. And this is where most people lose the real battle without ever realizing it. Because once gossip gets inside your head, it no longer needs a mouthpiece. You become the one repeating it to yourself. You start questioning your tone, your intentions, your worth. You reread messages before sending them. You shrink your presence. You soften your opinions, not because you've changed, but because you're trying to survive a story you never agreed to be part of. That's why breaking the cycle isn't about confrontation first. It's about reclaiming your internal authority. Because the moment you stop letting other people narrate who you are, their power collapses. Slowly, quietly, inevitably. The first and hardest step is starving the beast. Gossip feeds on reaction. Emotion is its oxygen. When someone senses that their words landed, that you're rattled, defensive, desperate to clarify, it confirms their importance. That's why the instinct to explain yourself to everyone backfires. You're not correcting a misunderstanding, you're fueling a system designed to keep you chasing closure you'll never get. Silence, when chosen consciously, isn't weakness. It's discipline. The Stoics had a word for this state, apatheia, not indifference, but freedom from being ruled by destructive emotion. You still feel, you still care, but you don't let other people's chaos dictate your nervous system. You don't rush to clean up a mess you didn't make. Epictetus once said that it's not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them. Gossip feels unbearable not because words were spoken, but because we assume those words define reality. Once you question that assumption, something loosens. You realize rumors burn fast, but truth has patience, and patience always outlasts noise. The second step is armoring your mind with perspective. Step back far enough to see the pattern. Ask yourself questions that shift power back into your hands. Who is spreading this? What do they gain? Do they have a history of conflict, envy, instability, or attention seeking? Are they someone whose opinion you would trust if they were praising you instead of criticizing you? Most gossip collapses under scrutiny. It's vague, emotional, lacking specifics, designed to provoke feeling, not convey facts. Today it's your name, tomorrow it will be someone else's. Once you truly understand that, the panic dissolves. You stop feeling hunted, you start observing, and observation creates distance. Distance creates calm. The third step is knowing when silence ends. Silence is not a lifetime sentence. It's a strategic pause. There are moments when clarity matters, when misinformation reaches places that affect your work, your safety, or your future. When that moment comes, the rule is simple. One statement: calm, direct, no over-explaining, no emotional dumping, no performance. Something like, I've heard some things being said, they're not true. If anyone has questions, I'm open to addressing them directly. That's it. No accusations, no name-calling, no defending your character point by point. Calm unnerves people who thrive on drama. Brevity disarms manipulation. Every extra sentence just gives gossip new material to mutate. The fourth step is the one most people underestimate because it doesn't feel immediate. Build an undeniable reputation. Not online, not through words, through consistency, through how you show up when no one is watching, through how you treat people who can't offer you anything, through how you handle pressure, mistakes, and silence. Reputations aren't protected by arguments. They're protected by patterns. People eventually notice who is stable and who is constantly stirring conflict. They notice who speaks with integrity and who always has a story about someone else. There's an old saying that if someone speaks ill of you, live in a way that makes it impossible for others to believe them. That's not passive. That's powerful. Over time, something interesting happens. The gossip starts to sound repetitive. The storyteller doesn't evolve. The accusations recycle. And people begin to sense the imbalance. You don't need everyone to see the truth. You only need enough people to notice the pattern. The fifth step is the psychological reversal. Gossip feels personal, but it's diagnostic. Every rumor reveals more about the speaker than the subject. Envy leaks through tone. Insecurity shows up as obsession. Control issues hide behind moral language. Once you see this, something clicks. Their words stop feeling like attacks and start sounding like confessions. So let them talk. Not because you're above it, but because you understand it. They spend energy trying to pull you down. You use that same energy to build upward, not louder, higher. That's the reversal they never see coming. The sixth step is quiet support. This is where healing actually happens. Not in confronting everyone, not in public vindication, but in choosing a small circle of people who know your character beyond rumors. People who ground you when doubt creeps in, who remind you who you were before the noise started. You don't need a crowd. You need anchors. A few steady voices that reflect you back to yourself when the world distorts the image. Protecting your peace isn't about isolation. It's about selectivity. And finally, boundaries. Boundaries are where gossip goes to die. When someone tries to pull you into talking about others, stop it immediately, calmly, simply. I don't talk about people who aren't here to speak for themselves. No justification, no follow-up. That single sentence flips the power dynamic. Their discomfort becomes visible, their chaos stays theirs. Boundaries don't escalate conflict, they expose it, and exposure is the last thing gossip can survive. Breaking the cycle isn't about winning. It's about refusing to participate in a game designed to drain you. It's choosing observation over reaction, stability over spectacle, peace over performance. Because here's the quiet truth most people never say out loud. You don't need to silence gossipers. Time does that naturally. What you need is endurance, integrity, and the courage to let misunderstanding exist without letting it define you. I think back to that version of myself, the one who couldn't sleep, who replayed conversations, who felt watched and judged in rooms that used to feel safe. I wish I could tell him this, that not every battle is meant to be fought, that some victories look like walking away unchanged, that protecting your peace is not selfish, it's survival. Let them talk. Let the noise rise and fall. Let the truth take its time. Your job isn't to control the narrative. It's to live so honestly that no false story can last. So now I'll ask you the final question. The next time gossip tries to pull you into its orbit, will you react the way it expects, or will you choose the quiet power that outlasts it?